Hi, everybody. How are you? Hope everybody's having a great Thursday. Feels kind of weird to be doing this on a Thursday, but tomorrow is crazy busy in my world because I'm getting ready. Get ready. I'm heading off to retreat on Monday. I am so excited. It's going to be such a great time. I'm going to get to see friends that I have not seen in almost 2 years. I am so excited. So, this is my latest design team project for Country Craft Creations. I used Country Craft Creations exclusive Midnight Ride. Yes, this is all I have of the cover sheet because I took the small tags that were on the bottom of it and I cut them out and I used them to decorate in places in this album in a box. So I'm going to do a walkthrough and then we will start the project. And hopefully we can get it put together that all you have to do on your own is do the pattern paper, and hopefully we can get this done in less than 2 hours. That's my goal. So we'll see how we go. So as promised, it is an album in a box. It measures, let me get my trusty ruler out. It measures about 7 1/4, but it's not truly 7 1/4. The bottom of the box measures 5 by 7. The top of the box measures 1/8 of an inch bigger so that it will go over the bottom of the box, if that makes sense. And I'll show that to you as we continue. Hi, Rhonda. Hi, Julianne. So nice you could join us, or join me, I guess is how I want to say it. So on the top of the box, what I did is this was one of the 3x4 cut aparts. I layered it up on some orange cardstock I had from my stash and a piece of black artisan. And then I just kind of skewed them a little bit, which is a favorite thing of mine to do. And then this is where I use the little tags. Hi, Marguerite. So glad you could join me today. Wow, thank you. And I just layered them on some artisan. I kind of like to pop things up. So that's exactly what I did in this case is I popped things up. Then I had this keyhole in my stash and this key, and I had some of this chain, and I attached it with my favorite Nouveau crystal glaze that Tammy does sell in the store. Hello, Charisse. How are you today? And I did use a single brad here just to cover that hole because I didn't want to attach it with the brads to the cover, hence why I used the Nouveau glaze. But here at the top, I needed a place, excuse me, I needed a place for my chain to go through. And again, my chain was through my stash. And all I did is I just put a drop of the Nouveau glaze up here to hold the chain up, but to allow it to have a little bit of movement, which I think is kind of cool. So that's what I did on the top of the box. And then I'm just going to turn it and I'm going to lift it up so you can see this end of the box. I had one of these handles in my stash and I just used a couple of brads and attached it. If you do decide to do this, the tool I used was my trusty dusty poker tool from Tim Holtz, or Sizzix, I guess is where it's from. No, it's Tim Holtz. So be really, really careful because I was so sure that with my luck, with how uncoordinated I am, I would punch this through my finger. But I did not. So all fingers, no Band-Aids. So that's a good thing. So that is what I did to decorate. And then I'm going to kind of turn it sideways so you can see I kind of followed the same pattern all the way around on the top and the bottom, except when I got to the back, then I just made it the width of this part of the box. And that's all in the measurements I'm going to be giving you. And then I did cover the bottom because remember, this is just chipboard underneath. We're not wrapping anything today. And then as usual, I put on my Handmade by Bonnie. So that is the outside. And then when you open it to the left. And it opens like this. And I'm just going to start with the inside of the box, inside of the lid of the box. And what I did is I put some orange pattern paper around all 3 sides, pattern paper on the bottom. And then what I did is I had a frame die in my stash, and I just ran it through with the paper I wanted to use. And I've left it open. And then I did a second one. Just hang on here a second, make sure I'm not gonna wreck anything. There we go. And I just ran through a second one and took the oval out of it. And that's just sort of to be a pattern for the person. At least that's my intent. Or for me, I'm not even going to try and put that back in right now because I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to wreck something. And then, of course, you could just tack this down. And I did pop it up just a little bit. Hi, RJ. So nice you could join us. And, of course, this comes from the cut-aparts. I did use some enamel dots from my stash. I chose to use black, but you could use whatever you want to. There are 4 pages in this album. Each one of the pages has a pullout. And I'm just going to go through those first. And this is mainly for decorating. I didn't add anything to them. I did round the corners. Because I thought with pulling them in and out, you wanted to make sure you didn't damage anything. And with the paper pad, I had the 12 by 12 paper collection. I believe I have enough paper left that I could make a second one of these if I wanted to. I'm hoping when I come home from a retreat, I can make a different project, but I'll do what I can. Hi, Brenda and Diane and Linda and Sharon, and so glad you could join us. I've got to watch 2 screens here, so make sure. Oh, there the comments are. The comments were hidden from me, so I apologize if I missed anything. I think I got it. Hi, Ginger or Ginny, Rhonda. Hi, everybody. So on the front of the first page, I just used a cut apart and it flips down. I did use some orange construction paper or pattern paper with it. Construction paper. I must be back at school. Hi, Jennifer. So nice you could join us. And up, I did use a scalped edge punch that I have in my stash. And again, I'm using the small little tags that were on the front cover page. And this is the page that I used a magnet on to hold things closed. I just thought with this mechanism here in the front cover, I wanted to make sure this laid flat so nothing was going to mess with my picture over here. And then the back of each page is identical. So it just opens. This is a 3x4 cut apart that I kind of cut down a little bit, matted it up on some orange. I did not pop anything up because I only have 1/2 inch gussets. And I did make sure that I left everything so that you can tuck your picture in under it, and 4x5s will fit quite nicely in this album. And then on the front of page 2, it's just a pocket. And this is one of the bigger cut aparts. I don't know why it keeps making those go away, the comments. And I just did 2 photo mats. Again, you can stick your picture up underneath the little edge piece. And those are 4x6s. Again, the back is a repeat. So a cut apart, layered on some orange cardstock, and then you open it up. Again, there is enough room to slide the picture up underneath the little tab. And again, here also, you could slide your picture in underneath it. Let's see, just give me a second here. We're having technical, see if that works, because it's hiding my comments. I don't want that. And then on the front of page 3, it is a mechanism that, so here is just one of the tags. It lifts up. Again, your picture can slide in underneath. Hi, Sharon, if I didn't say hi before. And more. And again, the pictures can, when I have it lifted, you just have to cut it down just a little bit. So that's the front of page 3. And like I say, the back is a repeat. The only difference here on the back of this one is there was a small orange strip of paper on the front cover. I cut those off and I made it like a little belly band, just so you can slide. Let me get it working. Your picture would go in underneath it. So you just have to cut it down just a little bit or not glue it down until you are ready to put the picture on. And then the front of page 4 is a flap that goes down, one that goes up. So there's lots of room in this little album in a box for a ton of Halloween pictures. Sorry, people. It just keeps not sure why. It's hiding my comments. So hopefully you see my hand reach across, it's because it's hid the comments again. So on the back of page 4, again the same, and another 3x4 cut apart, cut down. And then in the back, on the back of the box, or the bottom of the box, thanks, Chris, another little booklet, and this is just a 3x4, and it flips up for pictures. I kept the decorating basic in this album because there's only 1/2-inch gussets. And then, like I say, the back of the box itself lays down when you open it up. So it gives you a very nice, I love this look with the album pages in front of it. I also love that I was able to get the Haunted Halloween in there. So yes, so that's what we're creating today. And we're going to get started. I'm going to set this out of the way. I'm going to want to reference it probably at points in time. So I think I'll just move some stuff so I can have it available. You're going to need a corner rounder. I'm just going to open it up so I have it to look at. So I also did put the cutting guide in. I put the cutting guide over on Scrapbookers. It's also over on my Facebook group, All Things Paper by Bonnie. I believe if you're coming through YouTube, I put links to both of those places. So there is a cutting guide. I used 2 pieces of chipboard. I used black, but depending on what you're going for, you could probably get away with just the ordinary, I'm going to call it craft. Black chipboard will be back in stock at Country Art Craft Creations shortly, so just be patient, it will arrive. I also used 10 pieces of the 12x12 artisan cardstock. So let's get started. And we're going to use some binding strips to create this album. I have my instructions over to the side. And I thought I would just give you an idea of how to score and then cut your binding strips. So in my instructions, I say you need 12 1-inch by 12 binding strips. So all I did is I put this in my scoreboard. It's a piece of 12x12 artisan. I put it in my scoreboard, and all I did is I scored at 1/2. Scored at 1/2, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5. You see where I'm going? 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, 8.5, 9.5, 10.5, and then 11.5. And then I'm going to pull out my, let's move this. I pulled out my small cutter. And I could have done this off screen on the big cutter, but it's a big dolly, so I'm not going to bring it into the shot. Just going to open this up. And all we're going to do is, so I did my scoring on the half lines. You are now going to do your cutting. So you're going to cut 1-inch strips, but you're going to, so the paper was 12. I'm bringing it down to 11 for my first cut. And then my second cut is 10. My next cut is 9. So again, you can see where I'm going. I'm making my 1-inch strips. My next cut is 8. And I always like to cut from the bottom of my paper. I just believe it keeps everything straight. Next cut is 7. And then 6. And 5. And 4. On this cutter, what I can also do is I can line it up with the 1. And then 3. And 2. And last one is 1. And there are all your strips. Oh, thanks, Marguerite. Well, I know I said 12 pieces by 1 by 12, but then when I was prepping yesterday for this, I got thinking, oh, I need to show them this trick because this just makes it so much easier. And, you know, they don't have to be absolutely perfect because they're just binding strips. As long as they do their job, that's all that's important. Okay, so I'm just going to bring up my scoreboard and make sure I'm still in the shot because I don't want you guys not to see what I'm doing. And then I'm just going to fold on those score lines. Like, see, this one's a little off, but it's going to be okay because nobody is going to know that by the time you're done creating this album in a box. And I know some people are not fans of binder strips or binding strips. I love them. They take a little bit of getting used to, but once you've embraced them, as I'm going to say, it's a totally, you'll still make boxes the other way by wrapping everything, but this does make it a lot easier. Oh, Jennifer, I missed that you're in a meeting. Okay, are we supposed to talk quietly or does it matter? I'm just joking. And we're just going to keep going because it's just easier to have them all ready. And when I made my original box, I only have one full one sitting over on my tray. That's okay, Tammy. So glad you're joining us. I have a little problem today. For some reason, if I don't touch my iPad, it doesn't let me see the comments. So hopefully I don't miss anything. So we're down to like the last 4 of the binding strips. Okay, I lied. Now we're down to the last 4. And just give them a good burnish. And what you can do is, you know, when you have those pieces of 12-inch paper, but it's like 1.5 wide, you could always cut them into 1-inch strips and have them ready to be there when you're ready to do an album like this. And I have done these albums in everything. I've done baby albums. I've done little girl albums. I've made several of these over the years. The first one I made, and my inspiration for making them comes from a lady in a local craft store. I went to class and she was making an album in a box. And I went, what a cool idea. And then it's just kind of morphed from there. I kind of do my own thing. Sometimes I make them bigger. Sometimes I make them smaller. It's just whatever floats my boat. All right, so you need to cut some chipboard. And I'm going to give you another little tip. So I cut most of my chipboard over on my big dolly. But sometimes if it's like a 2-inch cut, you can't do it on the dolly. So I do it on my small cutter. And I have blades that are old, and that's what I use to cut chipboard. I took out my good blade, I put in my old blade, and I just want to show you guys something, just because it's something that kind of bugs me when I make an album, a box album. And I thought, you know, maybe I should just give another tip. So here's my chipboard. Let's say I wanted to make it 2 inches wide. I lay it on my small trimmer, hold it in place, and I score up. I do this several times, like probably 4 or 5 times. I really want the cut as deep as it possibly will go. Then I flip it over, and hopefully this will be a clean cut. And I repeat that process. I run it up again. And then that's what I want. I want it just to pull apart, because then you end up with a nice clean cut. And here where I've got a little bit of fuzzy stuff, I can take my little old sander, where is it? And just give it a small haircut to get rid of that. And that's how I get nice clean cuts for my chipboard, because I don't like it when you cut it on the small cutter and it's kind of, what's the word? It's rough, or it didn't cut all the way through, and then you've got a jagged little edge kind of deal going on. So that is another tip to put in your toolbox when you're making an album and you're not going to wrap said chipboard. All right, so we're going to start with the bottom of our box, and I'm going to start with the base, and it measures 5, my little thing out of my way, by 7. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do this. I'm putting my binding strips in this little container, and I'm just going to set it off camera. They're out of my way, but I can reach them. So the black chipboard, 5 by 7 for the bottom of the base. Then you need 2 pieces that measure 2.5 by 7. And you need 2 more that measure 2.5 by 5. Okay, so that's for the bottom. And then what we want to do is we're going to put our base something like that. We're going to start with the 2.5 by 7 pieces and attach them. Just going to set these over here for right now. I do like to use my scoreboard. Just want to change this blade, or I'm going to go to cut paper and I'm not going to be happy. 1 second, please. There we go. Because I will need that for binding strips to cut them. I'm going to turn my scoreboard around because I like to work up in this corner. I'm just going to move everything over like so. Okay. So we know that this is 7 inches wide. So my first binding strip, I want to cut it at 7 inches. Maybe just a touch less, like I'm saying, like a 1/16, not very much at all. Let's do the second one at the same time because we're going to need 2. Just a touch less than 7. Just push it back from the 7. All right. So, yes. We are, let's move the pieces up like so. We are going to attach this binding strip to the piece that's 2.5 by 7, and we're attaching it on the 7-inch side. Get my art glitter glue out. And what you want to do, hopefully my head doesn't get in the shot. I apologize ahead of time. Just right up to the edge. I mean, like you are on the edge. You're not over the edge edge, but right up to the edge. Give it a nice little burnish with whatever you use to collect any of the glue that might have been too much. Okay, now we're going to put that right. We've pushed the 2.5 by 7 piece right into the corner. Now I'm taking the 5 by 7 inch piece and I'm butting it right up against this 2.5 by 7 inch piece. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my art glitter glue, add my adhesive. I wouldn't recommend using binding strips for this or dry adhesive. I just think that you need the art glitter glue or a liquid adhesive because you want to have time to change things if you need to. Just giving it a good burnish. And then look at, you've already got one side on your box. So we're going to turn it around and we're going to get the other piece that measures 2.5 by 7. Now I'm getting warm. What else is new? But the 5 by 7 inch piece right up against the 2.5 by 7 inch piece. Get your second binding strip. Add adhesive to the one side, the side that's going to attach to the, I always attach to the smaller piece first. Again, that is a choice. You might want to do it the other way. And I'm just going to lift it up to make sure I'm not hanging over. That's why we cut it just a hair shorter than the actual piece of chipboard. And this is when the art glitter glue comes in handy because it gives you that second, that little bit of wiggle room. Like so. Burnish. Push everything down together. Add adhesive to the other side of the binding strip. And maybe I should mention one more thing here. So with these binding strips, right now, I am putting the glue on the outside of them. So if you held it like this, it would be on the sides of the mountain. Okay? And I'll try to remember to point out when I put the glue on the inside. So right now you want to put your glue, if you think of the top of this as the mountain, you're putting it on the sides of the mountain. Okay, so what we've got now is we've got our two sides and we've got a spot that for some reason, I know I put our glitter glue there. I don't know why it decided that it wasn't going to adhere. You want to make sure these binding strips are adhered well. How do I say it that way? Okay, so there's the sides. Now, the next binding strip, so there's the top, or the two sides of the box. We're going to put the one that goes on the end of the box, and that is the end that is the same side as the closure of the box is. So it goes like so. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to move things over for a second. And these two pieces are the pieces that measured 2.5 by 5. And one is going to go here, and the other one is going to go over here. Okay. So like that. So we need 2 more binding strips that now are 5 inches long. So just that's slightly less than 5 inches. So a hair back. And look at that, it's almost a perfect cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut a little off with my scissors. And I am just cutting just a hair because I don't want it hanging over. All right. Now maybe I'm going to work this way. thinking. So what I'm doing right now is I'm sort of lining everything up with the base of the box. And I think that will make me happy. Again, we're going to put adhesive on the side of the mountain. And then we're going to attach it to my smaller piece. And I'm going to slide it around just slightly. I don't want it hanging over the edges or the two shorter edges. I'm going to burnish it well. Give it a good burnish. Okay, now we're going to bring in the box again, or the base of the box. And I'm just lining it up. Okay, I'm going to lay it over and I'm just going to hold it. Okay, my binding strip is not impeding the left or right side flaps, as I'm going to call them right now. Adding my adhesive. Like I say, I like to use my scoreboard as another one of my tools in my little tool chest of crafting items I own. It's probably one of the, besides my cut trimmer, it's probably the one I use the most. It always keeps me in the frame. Okay, we're going to repeat on the other end, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. First, we're going to put our binding strip on the smaller piece. Like so. I'm just going to push it over, centering it, making sure it's right on the edge. Give it a good burnish. All right. And now line it up. So you want to make sure that this 2.5 by 5 inch piece is right in the lining up with the base, but not going to get in the way of the hinges. Thanks, Brenda. I'm glad that you're liking this album. They're so easy to make. They look complicated, but they are so easy to make. And there we go. And we want to make sure everything is wonderful. All right. So there, in less than 34 minutes, and I did a walkthrough, is the base of the bottom of the box right there. You are not going to put any binding strips on the outside because these sides need to fold up to close the box. Hope that makes sense. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to get the lid of the box. So we're going to set the bottom of the box aside. We're going to pull in the lid of the box. I'm going to turn my scoreboard around for a second so we can talk some dimensions. You know, I don't understand why it won't keep my comments that I can see them, but it's YouTube. It's YouTube, it's Facebook, it's whatever. The top of the box needs to be 1/8 of an inch bigger than the bottom of the box. So I cut my chipboard to 5 1/8. So that is a little tick just past the 5 by 7 1/8, which is the little tick just past the 7. So that is the base of the lid, I'm going to say. And then you need 3 pieces that measure, so you have 2 that measure 1 by 7 1/8. So you have 2 of those. And then you have 1 that measures 1 by 5 1/8. So let's get started and put these pieces together. So I'm going to rotate my scoreboard again so I can work with it upside down. See, Charisse, I don't know what's going on because normally they don't hide on me. So there's my frustration. So this cut is 7 1/8 for this binding strips. I'm just going to go to my big cutter for a second and I will be right back. All right, now you're going to say, why did you go to your big cutter? It just was easier to get that 1/8 of an inch cut, in my opinion. Again, we're going to repeat what we're doing. So I'm just sort of centering it, something like so, because you don't want it hanging over. I'm again adding my adhesive to the side of the mountain. And I'm just going to slide it into the middle. Again, I hope. Could have had it a little longer, but it'll be fine. You know what? No, I need it a little longer. I'm looking at that and I'm going, that's way, way, way too short for me. So we want 7 1/8 less a hair. How's that for how I'm going to say that measurement? I got to turn my light on over here because that was part of the problem. I was trying to do it in the dark. Silly girl. And I know I had an extra binding strip, so I'm going to be fine. Just back just a hair from 7 1/8. Going to be much happier with these binding strips. Okay, let's try that one more time. Add adhesive to the side of the mountain. Never thought of calling it the side of the mountain. Oh yeah, I'm much happier with this. You don't want them hanging over the edge of the chipboard, but you certainly don't want them to be super short. So let's give this a good burnish. Nice thing about art glitter glue is it does dry clear. Okay, and we're going to push everything down into the corner. And again, I'm pushing my 7 1/8 by 5 1/8 piece that's the top of the lid up against the 1 inch piece that's 1 by 7 1/8. Just going to lay it over like so. All right. Okay. Now, for some reason, I am just a hair too long here on my 7 1/8 piece. But for sure I had measured it, but obviously I did not. So I'm just taking it over to the big cutter and I just sliced off just a touch. Much better. It happens sometimes. This other one looks just fine, so who knows? So what I did is I took the 1 inch by 7 1/8, tucked it into the corner of my scoreboard, and now I'm just repeating that again. Adding adhesive to the mountain. And then adhering it, centering it to the 1 inch strip chipboard. Move that out of the way for a second. Making sure I'm going to be, you want it right, oops, get my head out of the way. You want it right up to the edge of the chipboard. Okay, that's where you want that binding strip to go. And like I say, by using, something sticky, by using my scoreboard, that helps me to keep everything nice and square. Hi, Diane. So glad you could join us. And then we're adding adhesive to the other side of the mountain. so. Burnish. So now we have only one of the pieces that are 5 1/8 or 1 by 5 1/8 to adhere. Just going to give my little, wondering if one of these, but I think they're all too short. They are. So let's go back to this one and look at, I'm going to repurpose this one. So this is the one that I cut that was too short. The art glitter glue has now dried. I'm going to repurpose it and use it. So I'm going to do 5 1/8 less a hair. And I'm going to dry fit this one because we absolutely do not want any hangover on either side for this. So we're going to add our adhesive to the mountain side. Like so. Lining it up. Making sure we're not over. Push it up just, there we go. There we go. And to burnish. All right, so again, just like we did the bottom of the box, just want to kind of line it up. Now, keeping in mind that this is 1/8 of an inch. No, forget that for a second. Just line it up with the lid of the box, making sure that you're not going to impede the opening and closing of said box. Chris, I believe the black chipboard only comes in one weight. It would be Tammy's normal weight that she brings into the store. And like I say, it will be back in stock shortly. It's been really hard to get black chipboard, I understand. All right, so now what we want to do is we just want to make sure that we're, so what I'm doing right now is I'm making sure that when I pull down my, or push up my flaps or my sides of the box lid, and I bring up this side of the box lid, that everything is nice and square, which it is. So that makes me happy. So let me bring in the project. You know where we're going. So now we're going to attach the 5 1/8 side to the 7 1/8 side. And we're going to attach it with binding strips on the outside and on the inside. All right, so I know that it's about 1 inch. I'm going to say that I'm probably going to cut these little binding strips at about 7/8 of an inch. So that's the tick mark that is just back from the 1 on a scoreboard. I'm just going to do a dry fit of 1 cut at 7/8 and just see if I'm going to be happy with that. You're welcome, Chris. Let's just do this one to start with, and then we'll know if we're going to continue on, because every box is a little different. And what you don't want is you don't want your binding strip to be hanging over the top of the side of the lid. Does that make sense how I'm saying that? Hopefully it does. So I believe 7/8, probably even like the little tick back from the 1. How do we use that one? Because I think that's going to be a better fit in my world. So there's 1. I know I need 2 of these, so I might as well do them both at the same time. Put the box back in. Again, we're putting the adhesive on the mountain side of this binding strip. Remember, the mountain side is the outside. So add adhesive to one side. And then I'm going to work like this, so it's closer to me. I'm just doing the same thing I did for the sides, attaching my binding strip, making sure it's not hanging over. Give it a good burnish. Looks crooked to me, so let me just look at this, and it is. It's kind of hard to see on the black. So and then what you want to do is you want to form the corner. You don't want to do something like that because then your lid isn't going to sit nicely on top of the bottom of the box. You just want them to be square. So you want the two pieces of chipboard just to be coming together. And if I hold it up closer, I'm hoping we can see that. Just let the camera have a second, and it just shows you black. So it's not really, you just want them square. There, you can kind of see it a little bit there. Okay, so that's what we're aiming for. So add the adhesive to the other side of the mountain on the binding strip. Attach it like so. And you can use the base of your scoreboard, which I know is hard for you guys to see. Just let me get it. So what I did is I just took my box lid, slid it into the corner, then took my burnishing tool and burnished the binding strip down so that it would be nice and square. So just going to repeat that process on the other side. So again, add adhesive to one side of the mountain. I am again going to put it on the longer 1-inch piece because I find that that just lets me see what I want to do. I'm going to burnish it. The key is to make sure your binding strips are not going to impede the box lid when you form it. So again, maybe this one's going to show up better because it looks better on my end. You just want them to meet. Okay, that's all you want them to do. You don't want them to be overlapping. You just want them to meet. And then we're going to add the adhesive to the other side of the binding strip. And again, I'm going to use this corner this time just to line things up. Give everything a good burnish. So you could use clips for this. You could use pegs for this if you felt you needed to have a little bit of, to hold it for a second. I believe we're good. But now what we're going to do is we're going to add our binding strips to the outside of the lid. And this is the only place where we're putting binding strips on the outside of the box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my two corners first. And then I'm going to do my two long sides. We're not adding a binding. We are going to add a binding strip, but it's going to be on the inside at that end. Okay, so we know these are 1 inch. So I'm going to dry fit one first. I'm going to cut one at 1 inch to start with. Maybe I'll take a slight measurement here just for a second. So you're actually going to be about, 1 inch and a bit. So that first tick past the 1 inch. And let's just do this dry fit first to see if I'm going to be happy. No, I'm not. So we're going to do a 1 inch. Every box is a little different, so it would do me no good to give you an exact measurement because you really have to just measure it, and that will tell you what you want to do. So what I was looking at, I don't want my binding strip to go above the top of the box. That's what I was getting at. Just want it to wrap around the corner of the lid. So I'm just going to cut one more, cutting it at 1, because I believe if one side says to do that, the other side should probably be pretty similar. All right, so I'm going to attach one. And the best thing to do is have your lid upside down on your scoreboard. All right. This time we are going to put the adhesive in the valley. So remember I talked about our binding strip as the mountain for the outside. I'm going to refer to the inside of the binding strip as like a valley. So that's where the adhesive is going this time. And I'm going to put adhesives on both sides of the inside of my binding strip. Okay, and I'm just going to line it up, push it right into the corner. If I'm happy, everything should be lining up nice and straight. And like I say, use your scoreboard. I'm really happy with that. Nice and neat. Now let's do the other side. And again, we're going to add the adhesive to the inside, to the valley of the binding strip. And wrap it. Get over like this. Okay. Excellent. And again, we're going to burnish that binding strip that we've put on the outside. Now you could wait and do this after you have the box together. I like to do it now just because it's easier to work with my small piece than it is to be working with my bigger piece. And we want 2 binding strips that are going to go along the long side of the lid. So it's 7 1/8. So I'm going to cut 2 more. And I'm going to go over to my big cutter, taking 2 of them with me. And I'm also going to cut my small, my short side, so the 5 1/8 side. And I believe what I want to do for measurements, let's just do a dry measurement first so I know what I'm kind of cutting. I am going to cut 7 1/8 for this. I'm going to do one first just to make sure that I'm going to be happy. Because what you don't want them doing is you don't want them hanging over, but you do want to get good coverage. Okay, so I'm going to be happy with that. I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to cut it. So 7 1/8, one tick. Let me get something that I can show you what I want to do. So there's 7 1/8. I want to go to the tick that's just past the 1/8. Okay. I'm not going to do it in 1/16 because I'm not that great with that measurement. So let's just try that over here. So like it's the tick just before 7 1/4. So what I did, it's the tick just before 7 1/4. And the reason I decided I needed it a little longer is I just wasn't getting the coverage I wanted over here, where this part of the lid is going to attach to the base of the box. So that's what I want here, is I want one that is 7 1/8. Plus a 1/16. So the tick just before 7 1/4. And this is the one that's going to go on this side of the lid of the box. And what I'm doing is I want to make sure that I have them pushed right up flush with the front of the box. Let's add our adhesive. And we're adding it to the inside or the valley of the binding strip. And we're just going to, okay, looks good to me. Just want to turn things around so I can see this front edge. Yes, I'm happy with that. So let's give it a good burnish, pushing it right into the, we're pushing it right onto the edge of the lid. And I need just a touch more glue right there. You know what, Chris? I'm going to just bring my box back in, my finished box, so you can see, because that's a good question. So let me close it up. You can see just a little bit of the binding strip right there. That is the only place you see it. So it would be just like when you're adding a flap to a page. You could miter it, but I don't like to miter it when I'm doing a lid or a box because it's just, you can hardly see it because it's black on black. So here is our second one. I hope that answers that for you, Chris. And again, we're going to do the same thing. We want to make sure it's just flush with the front of the lid. But that's a really good question, Chris. Because yes, that would bother me if I could see it a lot. But once you get your pattern paper on, you don't see it. Okay, so again, we're putting it right up against the corner and making sure it's flush with the front of the box. If I run my finger across the top of the pattern paper, yes, I can feel a little bump. If that was really something that bugged you, you could always measure this section and then add a piece of cardstock. But it doesn't bother me, so I'm good with that. And I've got a pretty OCD personality. Anybody that knows me would say, yeah, she does. If things don't look straight, she won't like it. That's talking about myself. All right, so now we need to do the binding strip that goes across the front. And I am going to measure mine. And I am like a 1/16 over 5 1/4. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking it over to my big cutter and I am going to cut it at 5 1/4 plus a 1/16. And then I'm going to dry fit to make sure I'm going to be happy. And like some people might put their corners on last, the outside corners. This time I chose to do them first. I really don't have a set pattern for that. Sometimes I do them first, sometimes I do them last. It just depends on how I feel. And we're putting the glue in the valley. And I'm just going to put the box so it's facing me, the box lid. And I'm pushing it on, making sure that nothing is hanging over. But once you get your pattern paper on, I really don't see anything. And burnish it well. Box making always gets down to what you like to do. I know some people that don't like using binding strips to make boxes. I like using binding strips to make boxes. I find that you don't see, unless you be using a very thin pattern paper, And like I say, one way you could get around that is if you could piece a piece of black paper in here, pattern or cardstock in here. But I don't feel there's a need for that because once you get it decorated, you're not going to see it. So there is the lid of our box together. Here is the base of our box. Let's make sure I'm going to put this the right way. There's the base of the box. And now we are going to attach the lid to the flap. So you've got the base of your box laying like that. You want to attach it over here on the left-hand side. You know what, Chris? I really like them too. They go together really quick. And because you're not wrapping everything, they're not as bulky. That would be how I would describe the difference. But in some cases I want to, because I don't know. So if I want to use red cardstock to wrap my box, I can't use black chipboard. I can't use regular chipboard. I can't use white chipboard. And as far as I know, they don't make red. And it does. It allows for the box to lay open. Okay, so now the next part of our mission here is to remember our lid is 1/8 of an inch bigger than our base. So when we're lining up these two pieces, we want to make sure that the base of this flap here that's attached to the base is lined up so that it's centered top to bottom, or yeah, top to bottom on the lid of the box. I hope that makes sense. And I know that this is 5. The length of this or the width of this is 5. So that's what I'm going to cut my next binding strip at, is 5. And I may have to trim it down a little bit more. Sorry, I just love using my big cutter to cut strips. So they're just easier for me. And I think I'm going to be happy with that. So my binding strip is the width of my smaller piece. So let's move the lid out for a second so we can attach this binding strip. So remember, when the box is laying, the bottom of the box is laying in front of you, you want to attach it to the left-hand side. You could attach it to the right-hand side and turn the box around, but we're just going to keep talking. We're attaching it to the left-hand side as you are looking at your box. And again, we're going back to putting our adhesive on the side of the mountain, not in the valley, on the side of the mountain. And I am going to turn the bottom of my box so that it's facing me for a second. Like so. And I'm going to burnish that binding strip. And then I'm going to bring in the lid. And hopefully I can do this all with it. What I'm checking is to make sure that I'm centering the bottom of the box and this flap that's on the left-hand side with the center of the lid, because the lid is 1/8 of an inch bigger. And I believe I'm happy with this. So I'm going to add my adhesive. Probably make a mess. Fold it over. And burnish. Okay, I'm not going to burnish it really hard right now. Just enough to hold it. Because what I want to do before I do anything else is I want to make sure that it's going to close the way I want it to close, and it is. Okay, I'll go back to explaining that in a second. So let's give this a really good burnish. There we go. All right, so with my couple of oops cuts, I have like 2 full binding strips and a bunch of pieces over on my big cutter. So just for reference, you probably don't need a full sheet of 12 by 12, but you could also use scraps to make your binding strips and just do 1 inch and then score them in half. All right, so let's just do this, close it up. And then I'll show you where we're not putting any binding strips. So there is our box done. And we did that in less than an hour because I'm not going to count the walkthrough time. There it is. There's the base of our box for our album. Now, you don't want to, let me flip it over. You don't want a binding strip here because the lid needs to be able to fold down on itself. And if you had a binding strip, it's going to make it rigid and it won't work. And you don't put any binding strips on the outside of the base of the box. But there it is. There is the start of our album in a box. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move on. And I've already cut my piece of pattern paper out that I am going to adhere over here. So on the left, so my lid is to my left. On this left-hand flap, I'm going to put down my pattern paper. And I'm going to turn it around so that my lettering, just got to find my lettering again here to make sure that I'm going to lay this the right way because it'll really bug me. There we go. Now, I have seen some albums in a box that they put the hinge over here on this right-hand side. I prefer my hinge here. That's just my preference. So what I did is I cut a piece of pattern paper that is basically, it's like 1/8 of an inch smaller than my piece of chipboard. And my chipboard was 2.5 by 5. So this is actually 2 3/8 by 4 7/8. I've inked the edges of it. And I'm just going to add. And this isn't optional, but I like it. It just makes it clean. It makes it tidy. It covers up the binding strips. I'm just going to center. So, making sure that it's not, sure I'm happy. And give it a good burnish. And we're going to set the box aside. And all I did is I made sure that it wasn't getting in the way of the box closing. All right, so let's set the box aside and we'll work on the hinge. And our hinge piece measures, let's turn my scoreboard around. It measures 4.5 by 5.5. And on the 5.5 inch side, we are going to score at 1/2, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, and 5. Because remember, we are making a 1/2 inch gusset between each hinge. So let's burnish all those score lines. Actually, let me restate that. No, let's just burnish the first score line. So it doesn't matter which end you start at. Burnish your first score line by pushing the paper back on itself and giving it a good burnish. And then we are going to add our adhesive. And yes, I'm using art glitter glue. I have been converted that I can make a hinge using art glitter glue. I'm going to burnish it. And if there's any, burnish it well. And then you want to stand up this hinge. And remember, I'm using Artisan, so I know I can be fairly rough on it or I can really burnish it hard. So we're going to leave our gusset and I'm going to go to the next, so not this score line, but the next score line, and I'm going to fold it back on itself and I'm going to burnish it. I am going to add my adhesive. What I like to do is I like to add my adhesive. So if I'm laying my piece of cardstock down on the table or my scoreboard, I like to add it to the right-hand side of the score line I just burnished, and then I fold it over on itself. And the other thing I'm doing as I'm making my hinges is I keep checking to make sure my paper is staying square, because we can all have a wonky score line. And then I'm just going to push the whole mechanism down on itself, like so. I can give it another little burnish if I want to. And then we do that. So I've got 2 hinges. So I'm going to have my gusset. So I'm not going to fold on that next score line. I'm going to fold on the score line that's after it. And I'm just going to take it and fold it back on itself. And I'm just making sure that everything is still square, and I'm going to give this a really good burnish. And it's so funny because usually what happens when I am doing a live is I have my iPhone with my YouTube channel up, so I can see comments over there. And I have my iPad with Facebook, so I can see the comments coming there. And for some reason, well, who knows? I am technically challenged when it comes to that kind of thing. So burnish. And then again, like I said, make your paper work for you. Stand up, or you can fold it back on itself like this. So I'll show you what I'm doing here. All I did is I just took, so those are my 2 hinges, I just folded it back on itself to get the paper thinking that, oh, I'm going to be a hinge. Who knew? There we go. We got 3 hinges. And they'll need a little work. They always do. Now, I'm over to my last hinge. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the far side and fold the paper back on itself on that score line. I'm going to give it a good burnish. And then I'm going to add my adhesive. Not stick my finger in the glue. And burnish. And stand it up. And there, just going to work these hinges just a little bit. I have made my 4 hinges. So like I say, this is a great album for 2x3s. You can use a 4x5. You just might want to cut it down a little bit. You can cut down a 4x6. And there is our hinge that we're now going to bring the book or the box back over and figure out where exactly we want this hinge. So I'm trying to leave a 1/2 inch on the left and right hand side of the hinge and about 1/4 inch top to bottom. So I'm thinking, I always like to fold my hinge that's on the right hand side and my hinge that's on the left hand side in on themselves, because that lets me see my distance. And what I mean by distance, it lets me see the distance between the edge of the pattern paper and where I think I want to put my hinge. I am going to put some marks, because that's just going to help me if I have lead in this pencil, which I do. And you can erase these marks. Hopefully I'm going to see them. Not really. So we're going to have to try this one more time to make me happy. A little higher. Just gonna get my ruler out here. Some people can eyeball. I think I want like that. Is that? No. So whatever works best for you. My OCD says that I have to use my ruler sometimes, and this seems to be a day where I think I do. I'm not quite at a 1/2 inch. And this time I'm going to see. Oh, why? Oh, it's the pencil. It's got nothing to do with, it's got nothing to do with me. It's got to do with this silly pencil. I'm going to have to take an eraser to this. There we go. Now I can see my pencil line. So now I'm going to add my adhesive to the back of my hinge. And what I do is I put adhesive on every gusset. So there's 3 gussets for 4 pages. This is the time you want to be generous with your glue. And I'm even putting a little there because I just think it needs it. Okay, so without getting it all over me. And I'm just going to line it up with that pencil line I created. Push it up some. Maybe a little more. That's the nice thing about using. And I need to go. That is the nice thing about using the art glitter glue. You've got a second or two to take your time, make sure that everything is laying down the way you want it to, and then give it its good burnish. And I'm happy with that. So all I'm doing is making sure that I'm not skewed when I lay my hinge in. That's why I'm sort of measuring to the edge of my pattern paper. And then you can give it a good burnish with your burnishing tool, your bone folder. And like I said before, I was adamant I would never put a hinge in without dry adhesive. I don't think I'd ever go back to putting a hinge in the other way. There we go. And there's our pages, or hinges, I should say. Looking good. Now we've got the hinge in. Now for the pages. So our base pages, we need 4 of them. And our base pages measure 6.5 by 9.5. And on the 9.5 inch side, we are going to score. Hi, Pam. Nah, you're never late. Remember, it's recorded. You're going to score at 1/2 and at 5. And that you're gonna do that on all 4 base pages. I shouldn't need the pencil again. I can't believe I'm keeping my desk as tidy as I am today. All right, so now we want to do our folding. So we're going to fold back on that 1/2 inch hinge. And then we're going to fold back on the second score line that was at 5. If I remember what I wrote down. And we're going to repeat that 3 more times. Fold back on the 1/2 inch score line. Fold back on the 5 inch score line. And 2 more. So usually I do my lives on Friday. So of course, one of the questions I always ask, anybody got plans for the weekend? But I'm doing it on a Thursday. It's kind of weird. Like I say, I don't have time tomorrow to do a live because I have things to do to get ready to go to Utah to a country craft creation retreat. I am so looking forward to this. All right, so we've got our base pages all folded. I just want to make sure that I have them all going the same direction, and I'll explain that in a second. So I like to make sure that my base pages all go into my album facing the same way. And maybe we should do this before I get into that long-winded conversation. So I want to miter the 1/2-inch tab on each of those base pages. Just make things cleaner. And one more. Get rid of my bits. Just clean up my, or burnish my score lines again. And last one. All right, let's bring the album or the box back in. Calling it an album, it's a box. We are going to take one of our base pages, and this is where I started to say, and then I decided I needed to miter first. I like to have all my base pages going the same direction. So if my 1/2-inch tab is on the front of my first base page I put in, it will be on the front of all of the base pages I put in. So what I'm saying is, so there's my 1/2-inch tab. I want it to fold to the bottom, and I want to see my folded edge. So it's going to go something like that when I have it all in this book or in this album box. And I'm going to be happy with that. So let's just put our 3 other pages to a side, and I'll explain. So just like when we make an album and we use this lay flat binding system that Tammy showed us how to do, we are going to do exactly that in the box. So what I am doing is I'm laying my base page. That 1/2-inch tab is at the very top of the page. It's up here on this folded piece. I'm going to lay down my hinge. And then I just want to make sure that everything's going to fold the way I want it to. And it is. It'll be a little tight at first because that's just how it is with the lay flat system. I'm adding my adhesive more to the top of my hinge. So I'm adding it to the back side. And then I'm going to fold it over, burnish it well. Wipe up any bits of extra, and it's going to be perfect. And then I'm folding it down. So now what we want to do is we want to put adhesive, except when you have a little bit of glue, you don't want it on the pattern paper. Hence, always check the back side of your page. All right, so we are going to add adhesive to this 1/2-inch tab, to the outside, and we are going to add adhesive to the front of the hinge. And I'm pretty sure it's going to probably make a mess. One second. Let's get my trusty dusty piece of white paper in here so I can actually see what I'm doing. So those of you that follow my YouTubes know that, especially black, any dark color for that matter, usually, no, let's rephrase that. Any paper for that matter, I find I like to have something behind it. It serves 2 purposes. 1, it lets me see what I'm doing. And 2, if I have too much glue, it allows me to clean it up. All right, so we have our first base page in. Now we're going to move on to our second one. And we're just going to repeat what we just did. And what we are looking for here, we want to make sure that where we're straight is over on the right-hand side of the pages. That's the most important place to be straight. Just gonna push it down. There you go. Open it up. Push back my hinge. I'm adding the adhesive to the top portion of the hinge. And lay it down. Burnish. Watching for the glue. Let's see. Yeah, and I just want to, I'm folding it back the other way. And you can always do this. There we go. Oh, a little bit of glue. All right, now we want to put the adhesive on the 1/2-inch tab that's going to close up our pocket, our page, our base page to make the pocket. Add the adhesive to the upper part of the hinge, like so. And then fold it down on itself. Looking good. Give it a good burnish. And turn the page to make sure it's not binding, because you still have time to tear it apart if you need it to. Okay, now we're down to page 2 or page 3, whichever way you want to look at this. Again, we're just going to line things up. And what I'm worried about is I'm worried about my pages over here, making sure I'm going to be happy. And I am. Hold things in place. I'm just going to move this just a little and then making sure I'm still happy. Yep. I always worry about what's going on over here on the right-hand side of my pages. I don't worry so much what's happening at the hinge. Unless something's really off, like you put your hinge in crooked, which can happen. You scored it crooked. All of these things have happened to me. But that is the nice thing about this hinge system, is if you do make a big mistake, you can rip out just the hinge and you save your project. So I'm just going to make sure I don't have any. I do. So let's get that wiped up. Close it up so I can make sure we're not looking good. All right. We need adhesive on the 1/2-inch tab. And it won't take us long to do the flips and flaps. Because remember, the back of every page is the same. So this little mini album or album in a box is actually quite quick to put together. Burnish and fold. Oh, I'm happy. Looking good. Last base page. So we're just going to rinse and repeat what we've already done. I am more concerned about being straight over on the right-hand side of my album in a box, and I am. Open. Add my adhesive. And fold it over. Burnishing tool. Burnish it well. And just make sure that nothing's going to be in the way. Wipe up any glue. All right, so now what we want to do on the last base page we're putting in the album, adhesive on the 1/2-inch tab. You know, I watch some tutorials and I go, oh, they lay their glue down so nicely. And then I go to mine and I go, you're all over the place with the glue bottle. It's probably why I have such a problem having to wipe up glue. And there we are. There are 4 pages in our album in a box. Look how, and that took us, including the walkthrough time, an hour and a half. We will so be done in our 2-hour window. Because I find anything more than 2 hours, I get tired. All right, so there is the album in the box with the pages. So let's get started and do our pages. I'm going to need to keep those out. Need my scoring tool. I need all of those things. All right. So for each one of our pages, we have booklets that are going to go in the pockets. I'm going to give you the measurements for those booklets. So they measure, we need 4 of them. So they measure 6 1/4 by 8 1/2. And on the 8 1/2 inch side, you're scoring at 4 1/4. And you're just repeating that 4 times. I'm going to burnish on those score lines. I rounded all 4 corners. Tammy has these in the store. These are We Are Memory Keepers corner rounder. It has 7 mil, 10 mil, and 4. I am using the 4. I actually really like this little guy. Nice and compact. And I'm doing all 4 sides because I find, especially when you're going to put a little booklet into a pocket of a page, you want to make sure that you've rounded the corners so nothing snags. Now, for demonstration purposes, I'm going back to the first page I put in the album in a box because this was our last and it's still drying. This one will be dry. And then you're just going to slide them. I'm only going to do one of these. I'm sure you guys know how to score paper and fold. And it will be tight at first, but after a while, it will fit quite nicely. And it just sticks out about 1/4 inch so you have something to grab hold of. So that is, each page has one of these booklets in it. So that's why you need it 4. So I'm just going to put these aside because I don't want the booklets in there right now because they're just going to get in my way and cause a problem. Put the top on our glue. So and then the next thing I'm going to mention, because I'll be coming to these each time, is the flap that goes on the back of each page is exactly the same. So I'm going to just set them off to at the side, taking just one for right now. So I'm going to get front of page 1 and the back of page 1 here. All right, so the front of page 1, we have 2 flaps, and we're going to need a magnet, so I can't forget about my magnet. The larger piece is going to measure 4 3/4 by 5, and on the 4 3/4 inch side, you are going to score at 1/2. Your smaller flap is going to measure 3 1/4 by 4 3/4, and on the 4 3/4 side, you are going to score at 1/2. So we're going to burnish those score lines, fold those score lines, burnish them. I don't need to miter any corners because these 2 flaps are going to be going in the center of my base page. The smaller flap is going to be adhered to the bottom. The bigger flap is going to be adhered to the top. So I'm going to round my corners now because that'll just make it easier. Well, thanks, Pam. I didn't think I was amazing, but the idea is to just give you something different, something I like. They're not going to be different. Other people have done albums in a box. This is not an original, but these are my flips and flaps on my album in my box. So I'm just centering it from the left-hand side of the base page to the right-hand side of the base page. I know it's hard to see without a paper under it. And right, when you lay the book down on the paper, that makes it hard to find the paper. So this should hopefully make it easier. So I'm going to go with the top flat first. You don't want it going over the top of the page. Did not miter the 1/2-inch tabs because there's no need to. And then centering it left to right. Or you can change that positioning. It's going to be your album. Just want to make sure it didn't go over the top of the page. And it's on the floor. All right, burnish. So there is the top flap. Now, the bottom flap, for my purposes, I want it to be in the center. You could put it over like this if you want. You could put it over here if you want it to. Like, it's your choice where you put your flap. I am just going to put my flap at the bottom of the page. And what I am centering it on is I'm centering it on my flap that I just laid down. I'm going to add some adhesive. Again, just going to center it. I think about there. Will make me happy. So something like that. And then I'm going to get a large magnet that I should have had ready beforehand, and I didn't. So now you're going to hear me rip the magnet out of a package. You know what? I have 2 magnets sitting right here, and we're going to repurpose them. So I don't have to rip open that package while we're live, because nobody wants to hear that. So I'm putting a little bit of dry adhesive on the back of the magnet. I'm going to flip it over because these are magnets I tore out of another project that I wasn't happy with. And so I don't lose magnets. I have a metal light that is over here to my left. And I attach them to that and then just wait until I need them, like today. So let's remove the backing off of that adhesive because the original adhesive is no more. And I am just centering it in the middle of the smaller flap, a little bit more this way. Okay, we are going to put some dry adhesive over top of it. Oh, well, thanks, Pam. That is so nice. And that's what this is all about. Sometimes we need to bring back those old ideas we've done before because they get lost in YouTube land. And then when we bring them back, everybody goes, oh, what a great idea. Well, it was there before, but it just gets lost. So there is our other magnet laid down, and we're going to put some adhesive over the top of it. Like I say, the first time I ever made an album in a box was at a brick and mortar store. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So there is the front of page 1. Like I say, these flips and flaps, anybody that follows me knows I am basic, no bells and whistles. I like it. I'm not a frilly person when it comes to album making. So our flap that's going on the back measures 3 3/4 by 4 1/2 and we are scoring at 1/2 on the 3 3/4 side. So fold back on that score line, burnish, miter. We want to miter this 1/2 inch tab, and we will do that for all of them that go on the back pages because it's going top to bottom. I'm going to round my corners now because it is easier when it's not in the book. Now, it's a little trickier when you're working on the back page, hence why I went, I am just putting a flap on them because it's easier to work with, because when you have to work with the album in the top of the lid. So hopefully my paper, I think I'm going to fold my paper in half. Sorry for the noise. Because it just helps me see. There, that's better. It's not all in the way. So I'm just going to dry fit. I'm happy with that. Add adhesive to the 1/2 inch tab. Now you don't want this flap going over the end of the page. So sometimes I turn it over so I can see what I'm doing. You know, whatever works. I get that paper out of there so I can give it a good burnish. Like I say, this is the hard part about making this album, is you've got to work with the lid of the box on the back side of your page. And hence why, as I said, I keep just a flap. You could, if you wanted to, put your flap over on this side, but I don't want to impede the turning of my page. So I often put flaps on the back side of pages on the left side of the page. But again, that's a personal preference. And I'm happy with that. I didn't use a magnet because the weight of the paper will hold it down. And remember, the only reason for a magnet is because I put a frame here. And I didn't want this page to pull up on this frame. I wanted them to play nicely in my book. So that's page 1, front and back. Let's move on to page 2. So I need one for the back. And I need our pieces. So on page 2 on the front, it is just this pocket with 2 photo mats in it. So that's all that's going on the front. All right, so here is what we need. We need the measurements for the pocket. And the measurement for the pocket, because it's a shallow pocket. So the measurement is 2 by 5.5. On the 2-inch side, you are scoring at 1/2. Then you are going to rotate and you're going to score at 1/2. Then you are going to turn it completely around and score it at 1/2, because as much as I say this is 5.5, it is 5.5 less a 1/16. So basically it's just less a hair, because you don't want it hanging over the top or the bottom of your base page. So let's fold on the score lines for our pocket. Like I say, it's just a shallow pocket just to hold the photo mats. Burnish, burnish. And now we're going to cut out some bulk. So as I say, where my 2 lines intersect, it makes an X when I kind of hold it like this. I take my scissors and I cut through the X, just where they fold over each other. If you go too far into the pocket, you'll have a hole. Mind you, you might want that look. So again, that's a choice. Right at the top of the 1/2 inch tab. These pieces out of our way. Give this a good burnish. Bring this back in. And we are attaching the pocket to the right-hand side of the page. I'm just kind of doing a quick dry fit so I know that nothing is hanging over. I'll be happy with that. So I'm going to show you guys this, and hopefully you'll see. Do you see where my paper is kind of, it folded up on itself? I didn't cut away enough of the bulk. So I'm just going to cut away a little bit more down to where those two lines intersected. And the reason I knew that is when I was burnishing it, I could feel that it wasn't burnishing flat. So if that happens to you, you'll know what you need to do. So I only put adhesive on the 1/2-inch tab, centering it, making sure I'm not going over the right-hand side of my base page. I'm going to be happy with that. Okay. And then again, those of you that follow me know that I like to use some tape and put it over that 1/2-inch tab so that my photo mats slide in and out of my 1/2-inch tab smoothly. And this is just what I do. You don't have to do this. Maybe it doesn't bug you. It bugs me. Now I'm going to add adhesive to my 2 short 1/2-inch tabs that are on my pocket. And fold them up. And remember, winter is coming. If you haven't stocked up on art glitter glue, do it now because it's going to get too cold and then Tammy can't ship it anymore. And then our 2 photo mats are 4 by 6, and we're going to round those corners. Now, some people are successful on rounding 2 at the same time. I am not. I know I'm not. So I do 1 at a time. So there's 1. And we are almost done with the front of page 2. And there's the front of page 2. And then the back of page 2 is just a repeat of the back of page 1. So here is my flap. Remember, it measured 3 3/4 by 4 1/2. And on the 3 3/4 inch side, I scored at 1/2. Burnishing on the score line, or folding and then burnishing the score line. Mitering the 1/2-inch tab, just cut off just a little bit. And then I want to round the corners. Bring the box back in, white paper underneath. Add my adhesive on the 1/2-inch tab. And add it to the back of page 2. Okay, give it a good burnish. I was just making sure that it was nicely in its home. So for anybody that's just joining, remember the tutorial will stay recorded. Remember to also like my YouTube page, subscribe to my YouTube page, because that makes my YouTubes come up higher when you search for things. I don't understand how that is, what that is, but that's what they tell me. All right, so the front of page 3 is just 1 piece of paper. And that piece of paper, let me double check to make sure I haven't cut anything wrong today. It's 6 1/2 less a 1/16. So when you put it in the cutter, put it in at 6.5, and then back it up just a little bit. So what I mean, let's get the old cutter out. So I'm putting it in my cutter, and it's at 6.5. I want to back it up just a little bit, so it's just a little less than 6.5, like a 1/16 of an inch, and then cut the paper. So when I use that terminology in my tutorial, that's what I'm talking about, less a 1/16. And then it is 8 3/4 inches long, and you are scoring at 1/2 and at 4 3/4. So I'm going to fold back and burnish my 1/2 inch tab. We are actually going to miter that 1/2 inch tab, and then I'm just going to fold my other and burnish that second score line. So let's start by mitering the 1/2 inch tabs. Get the book in, and I'll explain why I did a 1/16 of an inch less for this base page. Let's round the corners too. So we're going to round the corners on the very bottom, so not where the 1/2 inch tab is, on the other end. Do both. And in our finished album, it folds out like this. So that flap that we're just about to put on, the second part of it folds in. So it's going to eventually look like this. Get my white paper underneath. So the reason we made this a 1/16 of an inch shorter is when we put this flap on our page, front of page 3, we want to make sure that it's not going to get in the way of turning of the page. Okay. Yes, it is shorter than the base page. So we're just going to leave it stretched out right now. I'm putting adhesive on my 1/2 inch tab that I mitered. And I'm going to turn my whole album around, so I'm now working upside down, just so I can see. So I'm making sure that I have it as far over to this side of the page, but I don't go above the top of the page. So now I'm in the right orientation again. So what I was doing was I was making sure, just want to lift this up. Hopefully my head stays out of the camera. Just need to be pushed up a little bit more there. I put this flap on front of page 3, the front of page 3, right over on the right-hand side. So I'm not going to impair the turning of the page. And then it folds in on itself and it folds down. There is no magnet on this page because eventually by the time you have pattern paper on it, it will lay flat. I promise. All right, so that is the front of page 3. And you might have to kind of let it know that it's going to lay like that. And again, you have the same little flap going on the back of page 3. Measures 3 3/4, scoring it at 1/2 on the 3 3/4 inch side by 4.5. Score, burnish, or fold, burnish, miter. And then bring your book back in, or your album back in, box back in, whatever we're going to call it. Again, going to round those corners now. And we're just going to do a quick dry fit to make sure we're happy. Yeah, we're going to add adhesive. And when you put the glue right on the edge, wipe it off with your finger. Okay, add. Burnish with the tool. And that's page 3, front and back. So I only used one magnet in this whole album, or this whole mini album. You know what, Chris? If you belong to Scrapbookers, which you must if you're watching it through this, it is in the, just Google my, or search my name, and there is a post with these measurements in it. So that answer would be yes. Or you can go over to All Things Paper by Bonnie. The measurements are there. So here's our last flap for the back side. This is page 4 front. Well, thanks, Marguerite. That is so kind of you. I seriously, you can make these any size you want to make them, you know. And like I say, these binding strips, when you create them with the binding strips, you're not having to wrap it, so it goes much faster. You can wrap it. You just have to adjust accordingly. Maybe I'll do one like that with this pages wrap and attach them with binding strips, because the other album box I made, I actually attached those pieces together with the wings. So, Marguerite, you never know what could be coming in my thought process. You might have just given me another idea for another project. So, these, we need 2 that are the same size. They measure 4 3/4 by 5 1/4. On the 4 3/4 inch side, you are scoring them at 1/2. We are going to fold on those score lines, burnish those score lines, do it twice. Actually, yeah, I'm going to do it twice. We are going to round the corners of the bottom of the flap. Why? I always go out of frame because I'm letting these little pieces drop on the floor, and then I will vacuum them up when I'm done. It just makes it easier, because then I'm not sweeping pieces off of my mat all the time. All right, so one of these flaps is going to be going at the top of the page. The other one is going at the bottom of the page, and I'm just offsetting them. And what I've also done is you can offset them any way you want to. Like, I think I'm going to do probably about 1/2 inch. I don't know. We'll find out here in a few minutes. So I'm going to start with the one at the top. Going, you had this one at the bottom. Yep, but it's going to go at the top. Okay, and if I said I was going to go in about 1/2 inch, that's probably there someplace, give or take. I'm just eyeballing this. I am not using a ruler. There's one. Okay, and it doesn't go to the bottom of the page. And then my second one, I am going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just offsetting it about 1/2 inch. Something like that, I think, is what I want. So I just want my other page just to peek out behind so people go, oh, there's a page there. Let's add adhesive to the 1/2 inch tab. Okay, we're running over 2 hours. I apologize. So just gonna lift it up because I want it over just a bit more. There we go. And like I say, that is the nice thing about using art glitter glue. Because all I want to do is I just want to have a little bit peeking out. Remember, it dries clear, and you're going to put pattern paper on this anyway, so no one's going to see where I slid the page across the base page. Hello, Miss Tanya. And then it's going like this. So the top flap is laying over the bottom flap. I did not put a magnet here. You could. I don't know if I would use seam binding in this project because the gussets are only a 1/2 inch. Now let's do the back of the last page. And again, as I said before, it is a rinse and repeat. So it is 3 3/4 by 4 1/2. And on the 3 3/4 inch side, you're scoring at 1/2. And we're going to fold on the score line, burnish the score line, miter the 1/2 inch tabs, bring the box back in, and then, oh, we want to round our corners. All right. So we're just going to dry fit. We're happy. Add the adhesive to the 1/2 inch tab. Attach it. Making sure you're not over the edge of the page. And when you're happy, lay it down and give it a good burnish. The glue away. All right. So that is the last to the pages. Now we just need to do the inside, the back, what did I call it? Back inside of box bottom. So we're going to do it. We're going to put a pocket here on the bottom of this. Bring the book back or the album back in. So it's this pocket here that's going on that bottom inside of the box. So you're making a pocket. We all know how to make pockets. We just need the measurements. So this one is 2 1/2 by 8, less the 16th because you want it to fit on the bottom of the box. On the 2 1/2 inch side, you are scoring at 1/2. Rotating it to the 8 inch side, score at 1/2. And the reason you flip it completely around is, remember, you took off that 1/16 of an inch. You want to score this at 1/2 too, but over on this side of your scoreboard. Because if you did it this way, where you're scoring 1/2 and then 1/2, you haven't taken into account your 1/16 of an inch you've taken off. I hope that makes sense. And someplace I have a score tool that I totally took off my desk. Burnish on those score lines. And the last one. And then we are going to cut through that X, so it's where the 2 score lines intersect. Just cut through the X, don't cut above the X. And then we're just going to miter the top of the 1/2 inch tab. Get all this stuff out of our way. Burnish. Burnish. Excellent. Now, we brought the box back in. The most important thing to remember is you want to make sure that your side of the box will fold up and the bottom of the box will fold up. so that this pocket isn't in the way of any of those things. And so I'm just going to tack it. So I'm just kind of trying to center it, making sure it's down here by the bottom, but it's not going to, making sure everything is going to be okay, and it is. All the parts that need to fold can still fold. Get some tape. Burnish tape. Like I say, this is just an optional thing I do. And adhesive. So do remember to like my video, a tutorial. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, that's how you'll know when these videos are coming up. And you can find All Things Paper by Bonnie a little easier. And I appreciate those that have subscribed. Just make sure that my YouTube stay as high up on YouTube system as possible. I know Tanya knows exactly what I'm talking about, so I don't know, maybe she can explain it better than I can. All right, and then what's going in this pocket is a little bit smaller booklet because it measures 5.5 by 8.5, and on the 8.5 inch side, we're scoring at 4 1/4. We're going to fold on that score line, burnish on that score line. I am going to round the corners once I put the pin back in my glue. We're done with that. So we're just going to, and like I say, this little punch is pretty good because it'll punch through those 2 layers at the top of the booklet. And it actually punches through the 2 layers at the bottom of the booklet. And then that booklet is going to just slide right down in that pocket. So, in saying all of that, we have completed the album in a box. All we have to do is put our booklets into each one. First couple of times you put the booklets into their homes, they kind of catch on things, but as you continue to use it, they will slide in much easier. Feels like I might have some glue or something here. Who knows? Nope, looks like it was good. It was probably just me. I'm only going to slide it into one, and if it keeps causing me a problem, we'll shave down the book. I think there's some glue caught inside there. So you know what? We're just going to move on to the next one because I'm not going to bore you with having to sit as I'm trying to. Either that or I've made these booklets a little bigger. No, they just take a little time. There we go. There's a lot of things that are saying to themselves, you really want me to do that? But like I say, the more you pull the booklets in and out, the easier it gets. If you do have one that's sticking a bit, just shave a little off of it. Take it back to your trimmer, just cut a little off the edge of it, and then it'll fit. So there's our album in a box. Tutorial finished for today. And I can't believe I'm saying this. The next time I'll be talking to you is, well, the next time I'll be talking to you doing this kind of a tutorial will be when I get back from Utah. For those of you that are coming to Utah, can't wait to see you. And I hope you will enjoy making the project. Please make sure you share. Share it on Scrapbookers at Country Craft Creations. Share it on All Things Paper by Bonnie. And again, make sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel because that helps me get higher up in the little ranking thing, which means you get to find my tutorials easier. I think I've said that right. I hope everybody has a great rest of today. Everybody has a great weekend. Make sure to check in live or make sure if you're a member of Scrapbookers of Country Craft Creations to check in, because I think Tammy is going to be having some lives during the retreat. Have a great day, and I will see you on my next tutorial. Bye now. Take care.